the old world, a place of beauty and darkness. To its south are the Badlands, arid, scorched, home to war-hungry orcs. North, then, past the petty fiefdoms of the border princes and through Black Fire Pass. The mountains, once home to many dwarfs. Their numbers dwindle, but some holds remain strong. To the underways, the great roads below, now plagued by greenskins. Lies the lands of men and the Empire. Each city a refuge, bastions of light flickering in the dark. To the east, there is only darkness, for the dead do not rest easily in Sylvania. Over the grey mountains, fair Britonia, an easy ally, or perhaps an enemy. And so to the far north, the ice-gripped realm of Norska lies in the shadow of a twisted power. Change is coming. You must conquer this world before others take it.
Hello everybody! Ahead of the release of our first look at the Dark Elves campaign tomorrow, we wanted to take you on a tour of the entire Vortex map for Total War Warhammer 2. This video will lift the fog of war and show you the starting locations of all the playable races and sub-factions. The locations of Skaven clans will still be hidden, but for the explorers out there who want to discover the new world for themselves, be mindful that minor spoilers are ahead. Riddled with chaos, corruption and roaming Norscan tribes, we'll start out in the Aghall Wasteland, the most northeastern point of the map. We're journeying south now past Albion toward the north of Ulthuan, where the weather clears up a bit and we encounter the hardy sea folk of Kothic. As we venture further south along the chain of sporadic islands of the Eastern Ocean, you'll notice a lot of dangerous and difficult to navigate rocks by the cliffs, a hazard for any seagoing army. As we crest around the southeast of Ulthuan, the mountains cast long shadows on the islands of Yvres. These islands are rich in treasures and exotic sea creatures. Many a plucky explorer has ventured out here looking to make himself rich, only to never be seen again. Now we arrive at our first playable faction, Lothern under the legendary lord Tyrion of the High Elves. Tyrion starts with a large group of High Elf factions at his back, so has a relatively comfortable start position that can be bolstered with trade and defensive pacts to make Ulthuan an impenetrable fortress. Turning south now, we'll venture across the Shark Straits to the Land of Assassins next to the coast of Araby, currently inhabited by several Bretonnian crusaders who've claimed this land for the Lady. The dwarfs of Cobra Pass need pay no attention in their sandy mountain holes as beastmen tribes run rampant along the coastline. Across the land of the Dervishes lies Sudenburg and the Necrarch Brotherhood, factions in constant battle for the control of the shifting sands, while the Greenskins of Arachnos fight for control of Karakzorn. Here we encounter our second playable faction. Along the coast of Ruins is where we can find the last defenders, led by Krokgar of the Lizardmen. Aside from roaming beastmen armies, Skaven hordes gather here, no doubt an indication that the ruins here may be infested with the Vermintide. Southward along the shifting mangrove coastline reveals a beautiful coral reef, flanked by a string of ruined settlements. Armies will find landing at these beaches troublesome, as many ships will become stranded and bogged down among the deadly ocean banks, and exploring the ruins can yield riches or awaken unknown ancient magic. Our third playable faction is Clan Moors, led by Queek Headtaker of the Skaven. The High Elves of the Fortress of Dawn have ventured deep into the southern jungles where Queek Headtaker has an ambush lying in wait. Once dealt with, Queek will only have to look north for conquest. Across the expansive churning gulf, we arrive at the High Elf-owned Citadel of Dusk, at the southernmost tip of Lustria. The majority of Lustria is comprised of ancient ruins, jungles and swamplands, with the dwarf-controlled spine of Sotek forming the mountainous backbone of the continent. Onwards now to our fourth playable faction at the Turtle Isles, we have the Order of Lore Masters under legendary Lord Teclis of the High Elves. Teclis is quite isolated out here and surrounded by enemies. He'll have a tough time clearing the coastline and linking up with any other High Elf factions. Across the spine of Sotek we venture out to our fifth playable faction, Clan Pestilence led by Lord Skrolk of the Skaven. Surrounded by the Lizardmen faction of the Southern Sentinels, Lord Skrolk will also find it difficult to push out of the Lost Valley and establish a foothold in the vast jungles of the south. Working our way north now, beyond the ruins of the volcanic islands, we arrive at the Vampire Coast, a corrupted and tainted region eroding away at the lush jungles of the Mosquito Swamps. Further north, beyond the Settlers' Coast at the Isthmus of Lustria, we have our sixth playable faction, Hexodal led by Lord Mazdamundi of the Lizardmen. Mazdamundi is in a bit of a tough spot. He's surrounded by Norskin settlers of the Skeggi, the Greenskin Blue Vipers, and the man-controlled New World colonies, as well as bordering several ruined settlements. Along the far sea beyond the Fallen Gates we encounter the corrupted wastelands of the Ashen Coast. These are harsh lands that few dare to colonize, and where even fewer survive. Eastward across the Iron Peaks, we have our seventh playable faction, the Cult of Pleasure led by Morathi of the Dark Elves. She spreads her corruption across Nagaroth, consuming all who come into contact with it, friend and foe alike. Nagaroth is largely the theatre of the Dark Elves. The coastlines are all inhabited with different Dark Elf factions, and the climate is suitably cold and barren, echoing the torture and death that can be heard billowing out across these lands. Finally, we'll venture along the Sea of Chill to the Sea of Malice, arriving at our last playable faction, Nagarond, under Malekith the Witch King of the Dark Elves. So that's it for our quick tour around the Vortex campaign map for Total War Warhammer 2. Tomorrow, we'll join Malekith midway into the campaign as he leads an invasion of Ulthuan.
Beyond Reichland, Ostermark, and the reach of the Empire stands a frozen bulwark. Kislev, a fractured kingdom besieged from within and without by enemies of ideology and chaos. Tsarina Katerin, daughter of Tsar Boris the Beloved, rules from the peaks of the Boka Palace in the city of Kislev. The Ice Queen must lean heavily on her ice court if she means to bring order and security to these turbulent lands. But there are those who do not approve of Katerin's reign and would sooner see themselves in power. It's from Castle Alexandrinov, stronghold of the Great Orthodoxy and seat of Supreme Patriarch Kostaltin, that the Tsarina faces the most immediate threat to her rule. These two Kislevite figureheads vie for the people's devotion, so they might employ powerful boons from their pantheon of gods. Further north, between the northern and eastern oblasts, stands the Cursed City. Prague is the bastion of the north, a title earned through blood, corruption, and endless siege. A dying, tainted beast thrashing against the inevitability of its fate. In the east, far from Kislev's frosty plains loom the deadly mountains of Mourn. Here, ogres and other merciless beasts make their home, though none more awe-inspiring than the deified Firemouth volcano, from which magic-wielding ogres known as Firebellies draw their considerable power. Winding ivory road, the Great Hall of Greasus can be smelt before seen. Inside, Greasus Goldtooth the Over-Tyrant counts his riches and gorges on the spoils of his bountiful greed, all the while accepting mercenary contracts from anyone with deep enough pockets. Further east, straddling the border between the mountains of Mourn and Grand Cathay, is the narrow Worm Pass. Though far from home, Scrag the Slaughterer and his insane rabble have pilgrimaged from the west to pay tribute to the Great Moor, their violent god. Scrag drags behind him a mountain of bloody offerings to feed the beast in exchange for sinister rewards. Bordering these terrible mountains are the isolated lands of Grand Cathay. Past the Warpstone Desert in the heart of the wastelands of Jinshin, Zhao Ming defends Hanyu Port from brazen ogres and burrowing Skaven. It is the duty of the dragon siblings to maintain the harmony between yin and yang. Doing so will ensure Grand Cathay's strength and prosperity. On the most eastern edge of Grand Cathay is the capital city of the Celestial Loyalists, Wei Jin, above which hangs the Celestial City, home of the Dragon Emperor. With the turn of the Wujing compass, the Dragon Emperor's children can carve out Cathay's fate, economic powerhouse or machine of war. The compass decides. The Great Bastion snakes and weaves across miles of country, physically separating Grand Cathay from the chaos wastes beyond. For centuries has this wall stood firm, repelling legions upon legions of twisted demons and foul chaos worshippers. The Cathayans must remain vigilant, for the threat of invasion is ever growing. Past the lands of stone and steel is Gunpowder Road, home of Nangao and Miaoying. From here, the Storm Dragon rules the northern provinces and garrisons the Great Bastion. To fund such a task, she dispatches caravans along the Ivory Road, trading with distant lands beyond the mountains. Hers is the task of unending stewardship, for if the Bastion falls, it's the people who suffer.